Hello, I'm waiting for the 5 o'clock hour to strike, but I'm here and I hope you'll be joining me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the alternate venues for jazz stream industry stream this week. I'm very proud to be here and I'm so glad you asked me to do this, Gail Boyd. My name is Pat Harris. My company is called Pat Harris and Associates, and it's a subsidiary of my record label called Love Productions Records. I represent um, an artist by the name of Alan Harris, who's also my husband, and I also I also work with Igor Boutman, who is a Russian saxophone player. You probably have heard of him. He's quite a character. I I started in the business about 23 years ago, and I got involved in it sort of as a side thing because I was a dancer and a fitness person. I traveled around the world creating fitness programs for busy executives, and I thought that would be my life. But I always wanted to get more involved in music. So one of the things we did was open a recording studio in Miami, and I learned a lot about recording during that period. And that was in the 80s. So when we moved to New York, I began working full time as an artist manager, and I've been working that way ever since. Today, I was asked to talk about some of the projects I've been involved in and how this pandemic, and not only the pandemic, but what happened to George Floyd has affected me and affected what I'm doing, what my artists are doing, and what how it's affecting just the touring world in general. I mean, all of our tours are canceled. Many of us have no income. We have applied for the grants that, thank goodness for those, and some of the loans that have come through have been helpful. But in the meantime, we were scheduled to do a stream to celebrate Nat King Cole's birthday on March 17th with Alan Harris here in our living room, and that was just sort of a thing we were going to do once. But well, it's turned into a 13-week stream that we've been doing, and it's been a learning curve. I don't know, has anybody been streaming out there? It's quite a learning curve. There's a lot of tech aspects to it I didn't even consider. And each time I do it, I find I have to learn more and more about it. Um, Charging for money on Facebook is not easy because everybody has access to Facebook. So you can have a tip jar, or you can place the ticket link in your event, but it doesn't keep people from tuning in for free. So really, you just have to count on the fact that people will feel motivated to donate. And lately, we've been donating part of our proceeds to Black Lives Matter because we think it's pretty important right now to support that organization and other organizations like it. Um, when you stream live, I mean, not having that audience contact is a very weird thing, right? If any of you are streaming out there, how do you deal with that? I'm interested to know. We were streaming. Alan was streaming as a solo artist, and now he's streaming with piano and bass with Arco Sandoval and Marty Kenny, and that's been a little easier because at least they can feed off of each other. Um, but it has really been a learning curve. I recommend it, though. I think everybody should be doing something. It's nice to see all of you checking in here. I see Lou Lanza and Mae Brown Whitaker and Gail, thank you. Lydia, hi Lydia, and Dee Alexander, some of all my dear friends and people in the business with us who are all, I know you all are suffering right now in terms of projects. But all of us have said for so many years, I'm sure, wouldn't it be nice to have time to focus on our projects? And so I do find that I'm having time to focus on some projects I've been putting off. I've been involved lately in a project called Cross That River, which is a musical. It started as a song cycle, and now it's blossomed into a full-fledged musical that we've taken to workshops across the country through ASCAP and the New York Musical Theater Festival and the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center. But we did just do 5 weeks off Broadway at the 59 East 59 Theater, which was a great learning experience. So becoming a producer of musicals is now a hat I wear, and I really love it. I think I like to be involved in the theater. It's been really great. Do any of you have any projects out there, and in terms of theater or something that you're looking at to take into the theater? Because there's a lot of information that I've garnered over the years, so I'd be happy to exchange it with you. Um, I started presenting jazz in the 90s with a series at Sotheby's called, for 3 years I did that, and I debuted it with Tommy Flanagan, which was awesome. Tommy Flanagan and Alan Harris, and it was picked up by NPR, and we were really happy about that. That collaboration was a beautiful thing. It didn't last long enough. 3 years was great, but of course we'd have liked to have gone longer. But Sotheby's ran into a problem with their president. At any rate, so I took that idea, the concept of these concerts, and when we moved to Harlem, we were gifted with 2 pianos, and I wanted to give back to the community, so I started a salon series in our living room. One Monday a month, we would do a jazz program, a jazz, concert, and we'd invite friends, and we didn't charge tickets, but we did present some really wonderful artists, and the audience enjoyed it, and the artists themselves enjoyed it. They were able to sell CDs and garner new fans, and it's a really wonderful thing to be able to share your music up close and personal, because it's so taken for granted, the amazing talent that's out there, and unless you see it up close and personal, you often don't realize it. Have any of you done house series like that? I know there's a lot of them across the country, but that was a really great way to open up this space that we have here in Harlem. So I also have started doing that a number of years ago. I've actually been doing it for 18 years. It's called 2 Great Days of Jazz for the APAP conference. And if you're familiar with the APAP conference, the Association of Performing Arts Professionals, we do 2 days of jazz in the New York suite where we present, I don't know, I think it's 25 artists over a 2-day period. Every 30 minutes we change. And that has been a real great tool to introduce new artists to new presenters. And on the opening night of that conference, I do a jazz series, and we call it Harlem After Dark, here in our apartment. And that's been a real joy to do. I see somebody said that they're working on setting Shakespeare sonnets to music, which sounds beautiful and would work in theatrical settings. Well, Lou, you can always contact me later and we can discuss how some of that works. Theaters, there are small theaters that are always looking for unique projects. And frankly, because jazz has a lower price range, you can fit in. I mean, I've seen some really interesting projects at 59 East 59 Theater. Let's see, what else have I got to talk about today? Oh, crowdfunding. How many of you have been crowdfunding? We've, with our record label, we've released most all of Alan's albums, Love Productions Records. We have partnered with distributors in Europe, and that's worked out well. As an independent artist, it's, one of the best distributors is the Orchard or places like that, but they won't give you much attention. So it's good to find the smaller distributors that you can work with. And I was really impressed to see, for instance, last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, the Baylor Project through CD Baby did so well. And that just really made my day. I loved seeing how well they did with CD Baby, because originally CD Baby was one of those tools that you use that wasn't really considered a great distributor, but they've really come a long way. So do you have any questions about independent releases? So what we do is we raise the money ourselves. We go into the studio with the project. I'm often either the producer or the co-producer. The last 4 projects we've done, I've worked with Brian Bacchus, who is what a mentor, and I've really enjoyed learning from him. And our last project we have just finished, but not released because of the pandemic, was with Kamal Kenyatta. So all of these, working with producers is wonderful. I always ask artists when they're planning their release, how do they choose their image and their photos and their person to write their bio? I mean, there's certain steps to take, and I always recommend that they go outside of their family and friends, because they're too close to you. You really need to have someone who doesn't know you very well help you at least that's my personal opinion, help you decide on what image will help you go forward. And the image is so important. How are you going to look? How are you going to carry that through in your music? Does how you look fit the music you're doing? I see a lot of artists with great music, but maybe not a great look, or maybe artists with a great look, but maybe not such great music. But they have to match. It's I find it's really, really important. I see Marcus Baylor just tuned in. Marcus, I loved what you did with your project. It was just great. Um, so I guess some of the other things that I've been involved in recently, we're finishing a novel of Cross That River. So that's another part of the artistic art form that I'm looking forward to finding out about publishing. That'll be in a few months, I think we'll be finishing that project. And we're also starting a project called Harlem After Dark, an Uptown Jazz Party. And that's going to be going on tour next year. And I'm very excited about that because we'll be taking this concept of this intimate party that we've created here, this party atmosphere, and broadening it to be with a core band and then guest artists, dancers, poets, actors, recitations, to increase the performance aspect of it, to open it up to all kinds of different live performances with music and with a host, myself and Alan being the hosts. So we've been working on that, and I have a partner that's been joining me. It's been really nice to work with her, Anna Becker from Kingsborough. Let's see, let's see if we got any questions here. Well, thank you. Some people have said, Amy Allen has told me she's seen Cross That River, my Pittsburgh friend. Hey, girl. Yes, so that was a real joy putting that project together. 9 pieces, so 4 singers, 5 band members. We had a great musical director in Shirzet Tinnen. We featured the singers, Carolyn Lenhart, who, if you don't know, she's just, I don't know how you couldn't know her. She's an amazing singer. She's been on tour with Steely Dan for so many years. Carolyn Lenhart, Joseph McKenneth was our young Blue. The character's name in the story is Blue, and he's an escaped slave who makes his way to Texas and becomes a black cowboy. The story's really important, and we feel even more important now because of the lack of history, the lack of acknowledgement in the history books for Black culture, for anything really, people of color. And this has been a project of Alan's he feels really, really deeply about. So we've really spent a lot of time working on it. We started working on it in 2001. It takes a long time to get a musical off the ground. And, we workshopped it to death. We took it out to the Lyde Center in Nebraska for the ASCAP Musical Theater Festival and got input from Broadway producers about the show. And that was wonderful. But we found that the more input we got from people who didn't know the show as well as we did, the further away we got from the message we wanted to convey. So after all those workshops, we went back to the drawing board and we've rewritten the script, maybe 6 or 7 times. So now we feel like the story is the way we want it to be told. When I use publicity, when I release a CD, I always use publicity. I always use radio promo. It's costly, but it's really important. Because I don't have the time, and most artists don't have the time to call radio stations all week long. I don't know the journalists like Lydia Liebman does, or like I guess Don Lukoff or my old friend Jana Lasorte. I don't have those kinds of contacts, or if I do, it's just better to have someone who's a professional do that work for you. So it's worth the money. I mean, I started crowdfunding to do these things through Artist Share. And that was my first foray into the crowdfunding arena. And then I moved into Kickstarter after raising money through Artist Share. It's a lot of work keeping all your fans up to date. And I have found, after doing, I think, 5 projects through crowdfunding, that most of the fans, or at least most of Alan's fans, don't really care about receiving all of that, the daily videos or much of the material that you produce for them. They really just want to help you fulfill your dream and make your project come to fruition. Has anybody else had that experience? I wonder, because I think we spend a lot of time trying to create incentives for people to donate. And I think that the incentive is just to support the artists. Yes, I do like the reason I like Kickstarter, and that was I started using it before GoFundMe came about. The reason I liked Kickstarter is because it had big recognition, and I find if you go with things that people who aren't in our business recognize, Kickstarter was getting a lot of press, and it was kind of new, and it was the same with Artist Share. So we always met our goal. The downside of Kickstarter is that if you don't raise your goal, then you have to give back all the money, which kind of sucks. Okay, public radio. You know, our jazz industry, the radio stations we used to have so many have fallen by the wayside, and that's really sad. And they exist on public support too. So how do I feel about public radio? We need them desperately. Terrestrial radio is still really important, and they have to be serviced. They don't have often they don't have digital ability, so you can't just send them digital files. You have to still send them CDs. I would really love for our next release to be just a digital release. But has anyone done that? I would be very interested to hear your thoughts on that, because what's the point? I mean, basically a CD has become like your business card. You give that out, and half the time when you sell a CD or when you're selling CDs, people don't no longer have CD players. So I wonder how much longer we will actually be producing these CDs, and the CD manufacturing companies, I'm sure, are wondering the same thing. What is the next phase? Does anybody have any ideas? Let's see. Gail says, yes, they don't need as much contact from artists as originally thought. Do you mean the public radio, Gail? Is that what you're talking about? Because I'll tell you one thing that we did with Alan's last release is I had Alan make a very short 1-minute video for every radio station that added him to thank them. And they seem to really appreciate that, because sending them things or sending them, you know, a thank you is nice, but everybody's so busy and reading. Anyway, that seemed to work well for us. Let's see. Lydia says, digital release with limited run of promos for press and radio is the move. See, Lydia would know. She's in the forefront of the publicity industry for our genre, and I rely on her expertise, as we all should, on those who are doing it for a living. I would love to see us have to produce fewer CDs, that's for sure, because it's expensive. Let's see, Amy's asking me, you mentioned you were holding off on releasing something because of the pandemic. What is the outlook? Do you think of releasing new music in the environment going forward? You know, that, Amy, that is like exactly what I'm thinking about. I almost feel like we blew it not to release now, because I feel like now people are really looking for things to interest them. But after speaking to our producer and going back and forth with Alan, we decided to hold off until January. Because generally, when you release a CD, you want to have a tour. So if you don't have a tour, how are you going to support that CD? Virtual touring, I think, is with us for good now, frankly. I think we're going to be using the virtual world for good. Don't you think? I mean, it's just come about so quickly. We're all wondering how viable it is, but we need to find a better way to monetize it. Has anyone used Stage It? I'm interested to know, because Stage It is one of those platforms that I decided not to use because nobody knew what it was. But it is one of those platforms that you can't get access to it unless you pay. You have to buy a ticket. And I like that idea. But also I use I know streaming, you should be paid. However, I also have the alternate view of it is that if you're aware of Fish, and if you're aware of how the Grateful Dead did their marketing, there was a great little book that somebody from the Grateful Dead wrote that I read about publicity, and you know, they encouraged all their fans to tape them live, and they didn't charge, but the fans would still buy the albums because the live tapes pretty much sucked. When you play for a jazz club, for instance, Smoke here in New York, or really a Blue Note, any of the jazz clubs, which I love, and I don't ever want to see them go away. But when you play for them, you can reach 50 people to maybe 150 people a night. And how many people can you reach streaming? I mean, you can reach hundreds of thousands if you keep at it. So your name recognition is getting out there, and you're getting a quid pro quo. You have to be careful, of course, because you're growing your fan base, and you're using that for a purpose. I mean, you don't just grow it and just leave it, go for nothing. You try to encourage people to become part of your mailing list, because obviously Facebook is not going to share the information of any of their subscribers. So that's a big problem. And I love that what Gail said the other day on her on her stream, saying that she would like to try to change that we should be able to have the data, for instance, from Spotify and from Facebook and from Instagram and from YouTube. We should be able to have that information of the fans that are following us. It just doesn't seem quite fair, does it, that they get all that information and we don't. Okay, so Gail says they released Lakeisha's Benjamin CD in the pandemic, but the tour was canceled. But see, she got a lot of press. So Gail, do you think that press will help you setting up the tour later? I'd be interested to know. Virtual touring, I agree. Dimitri Matheny uses Stage It. I'd love to, I should probably reach out to him, because I would love to find out how he finds that. See, the other thing I have found out with streaming, oh God, it was like last Saturday was horrible because we were using a program called StreamYard, and the audio was awful. We had to stop using that, and now we're using OBS, and the sound is much better. But each time, each phase you get into, you find there's more you could be doing to make the sound better. And we're in the music business. We want our music to sound good. And I'm sure somebody out there is creating a great platform. I'm just waiting to see what it will be. So if anybody has any questions, let's see. What does Michelle say? You should be able to get those metrics from the streaming services. Well, yeah, the streaming services, like from now, you all you get is their Facebook information. We already have that. So what we want is their emails. OBS is awesome. I agree. It has really changed up. So we have two laptops and a phone streaming at the same time, and now I'm trying to connect them all together. Okay, so Spotify for Artists, Lydia says, does give a limited amount of data about who is streaming. It's not super specific or detailed, but it is better than nothing. Okay, Gail says we can't get the data, but all of this would be really helpful. I mean, in this time period where we're all struggling, where we're all trying to make the best out of a bad situation, where we can't be live, these organizations need to change their paradigm, I think, and so that's something that we should all be taking up. So one of the other projects we decided to start was a podcast, because we've been really, really loving the medium. Last year I went to a conference on podcasting, which was very inspiring. And I thought, it's taken, that was last year already. It's taken me that long to focus on it. So I thought during this pandemic I would be able to focus more on it. And that's what we've been doing, coming up with a name, coming up with an image, coming up with we want to do it on Spotify. Let's see, what are people saying here? You cannot get the data. Okay, so the data is more geographical. I don't know how helpful that is. We need information on how to reach people outside of their social media, because that's where that's important. Because if we could, that's obviously what Facebook and all the other social media platforms want. They want that personal information. Let's see, Dan Zywin wants to know, do I have any colleagues in Baltimore, someone doing what you are doing? Actually, I do not. I don't know anyone in Baltimore doing what I have been doing. So no, Dan, I'm sorry to say I don't actually. But there should be someone down there doing that. Not too far from DC. And what about, no, I was going to suggest the club. What's the club in Baltimore? Todd Barkin's new club. Have you been there? How is that club surviving right now? All of our clubs are really suffering. It's been it's been really hard on them, and I really feel for them too, because we really need them. We need them to stay in business, and serving food is not that great of a thing for a jazz club. They don't survive on food. So I really don't know anyone down there. Keystone Corner, thanks, May. Yes, Keystone Corner. He's keeping jazz alive in Baltimore. And I guess there's another club not too far. Oh, No, that's in another part of Maryland. But I don't really know anyone doing what I'm doing. But there are managers. You almost don't have to be in a specific city to do what I do. We can do whatever we do. Listen, I represent someone in Russia. I don't know what he's doing. Most times I have to go on his website to see where he's playing. But when he comes to America, I have to arrange. He travels with a big band, which is really challenging because we have to book flights, reservation, hotels, and visas are a nightmare. And I wonder what's going to happen next year. Are we going to be able to get visas for Russian artists or coming to America? That this year, oh well, actually that was in January we had cancellations because the Ukrainians were boycotting the Russian performances by the Russian artists performing in Igor's band. That was a situation I didn't anticipate, and I had to put out a lot of fires for that because we're trying to bridge politics. We're trying to bring people together through music and through the arts. Igor's doing his best with all that he's doing. He produces 8 festivals in Russia every year. He has huge education classes that he runs, and he also is the president of the PRO over there, which is the equivalent of ASCAP and BMI. So I don't feel like artists should be persecuted for politics when they are not politically involved. They should be allowed to do their art and perform their art. And he was coming here for an award that has been postponed now because of this situation. So I'm really waiting. Lydia, you worked on that tour with us. Hello, Renee Marie. It's so nice to see you. We did a wonderful project with Renee Marie called Two Skirts and a Shirt. Only Renee could come up with a title like that, don't you think? So we had Renee and Carla Cook and Alan doing this really great tour. They did it at Dizzy's and then at the Kennedy Center. Okay, so Paula West is here, and I love Paula from San Francisco. She feels fortunate because everything came together last Saturday for her virtual concert, and now she had 12,000 views. Woohoo! That's beautiful. Yes, I mean, I've watched some of these virtual concerts, like, for instance, Emmett Cohen's concerts are booming. He's doing such a great job. I love following him and seeing what he's doing on Emmett's Place. There's a lot of great material, and I'm always Monty Alexander. He's doing an amazing series. I've spent so much time listening to Monty's stories, and we're always saying, Monty, you need to write these down. You need to share this with the world. He's not just, he's a font of information about the history of jazz and the players, the actual artists themselves. And listening to his stories on Saturdays at 4 p.m. has been a great experience. Let's see. Speaking out politically, I feel now is the time for artists. I mean, I've always felt, let me put it this way. When Renee Marie did the Black National Anthem in Denver that year, I supported her. I didn't have a problem with it. I think people who have a problem with that are just, they don't understand. They don't understand the pain and suffering. And I think speaking out politically now, it's who we are as people. It matters. It's important. In the 60s and the 70s, art was reflecting the times, and it needs to now as well. So I love what Gail and Danny Melnick and Bryce Rosenblum are doing, giving $1,000 to artists to create new projects or new works of art underneath this. Since this pandemic started, I think it's a really important support system, and it's amazing how much money they've raised and how many people are supporting the arts right now. Has anybody received a grant that they weren't expecting? Or the grants have helped us a great deal. Let's see. Are you using only original music on your podcast, or are you licensing music? Is that expensive for your podcast? We won't be doing music on our podcast. We're doing interviews, and we're starting with audio, and we're starting with well, we have a couple of things in the works. There's a new movie coming out that Spike Lee just did. It's about 4 soldiers in the Vietnam War, and one of them is Isaiah Whitlock, and he's agreed to be one of our early interviewees. We've known Isaiah for a while. We met him at the Umbria Jazz Festival, and he's passionate about jazz, and he's, of course, a great artist. And I'm really looking forward to what he has to say. And the movie's debuting on Friday night, so I hope everybody goes to see it and supports Spike Lee's new movie. Okay, well, I'm about running out of time. I hope I've touched you, and I hope you feel like you've learned something, or I've shared. I certainly have felt like you shared with me. Thank you. And I hope to see you in person. My friend Susan Jenkins, I got to say a shout out to her. She's doing? I think she's doing the next one tomorrow. So you don't want to miss Susan. Listen, I'm sweating to death here, so I'll say goodbye. Let's see. I have one more question. What do I feel about putting out music on custom printed flash drives? You know, I've really thought about that. I it's so much easier to listen to if it works. There's something weird about it, but maybe because I'm so old school. I received I received a lot of those at Jazz Ahead when I was in Bremen last year, and I've listened to them, and they're easier to download. It works much better. Wait, let's see. Reggie's asking, with state entities economically folding, will we have to go totally to philanthropists? Yeah, I'm thinking we are. You know, Igor is completely supported by the Russian government, which makes it so much easier. Um, let's see. Any other questions? You have been. Thank you everybody. I appreciate it. Oh, Karen Kennedy's tomorrow. You don't want to miss Karen. She's got some wonderful information to share with you all too. So I'll say adieu and good luck, everybody. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see you all in person soon. Let me figure out how to end this. Okay, end video. There we go. Goodbye.